Hey, party patrons. Welcome to my very first podcast episode. And listen, okay, so if you read my book or if you follow me on social media, then you might already know that when it came to my YouTube channel, I procrastinated for too many months because I wanted to make sure everything was like really well organized and planned out and perfect and scheduled and all these things. And I was very nervous. And I'm not going to do that with the podcast. I don't really know what I'm doing and the exact format and how things are going to go. I don't even have a name for it yet, but I decided that we're just going to start. We're just going to start and go with some of the ideas that I have and just let it flow. And if any of you know what a type A person I am, this is hilarious that I'm just like trying to go with the flow. So here's what I have so far. Okay. Introduction. And, y'all send me questions on the regular. That's great. I have a lot of questions prepared for the first episode from you all on my social media. So if you are not following me on Instagram, follow me at Zoe Hong. And I will hopefully get around to answering your question on air. That sounds hilarious, like this is actual radio or something. And then I thought I would do a rant of the day because my husband thinks my random rants are hilarious. Most of them are not involving anything to do with fashion or making stuff, and so they're irrelevant. But every once in a while, I have a lot of fashion opinions, okay? And usually, people think that Twitter is the best format for these sort of fashion opinions. But for me, trying to contain my rage in 280 characters is not one of my talents, okay? I have some talents. Tweeting is really not one of them, okay? Which is why I have more than 500,000 followers on YouTube and 3,000 on Twitter, okay? Tweeting, I'm not great at it. That's fine. We all we all have our crosses to bear, our strengths, our weaknesses, whatever, right? Number one, was fashion school worth it? It was to me. I went to an excellent school, Otis College of Art and Design, and I learned a lot of things that I couldn't have learned elsewhere. I got my BFA in fashion design at an accredited, very intensive 4-year program. I learned a ton. I made friends that I'm still friends with. Like, I literally just went on a 10-day Europe trip with my bestie from fashion school because we are still friends. And and we're still friends after we took that trip together, okay? So that's friendship. That's true friendship. And the thing is like, whenever you have an industry or a field like fashion design where you don't need a degree, like being a doctor or a lawyer, you don't need a degree, people tend to be dismissive towards that degree. But it's like, you got to learn that stuff somewhere, okay? So you got to learn whatever it is you want to learn somewhere. And so if you can learn it outside of school, outside of a bachelor's program, etc., then go do that. But yeah, you do have to learn stuff before you decide to enter the industry. How did you start design? How did you get into fashion? Oh my God, I got this so many times. I have always loved fashion. I never fell out of love of fashion. Fashion is like, to me, fashion is like a happy marriage. Like, I've always loved fashion and I probably always will love fashion. But do I sometimes get aggravated with fashion? Of course. Do I understand fashion's limitations and faults? Of course I do. Do I still love fashion anyway? Yes. Okay. And, I grew up in Alaska, which is a bit of a fashion nothing land. And so, the easiest route for me to enter the industry was to go to school. The difference between teaching a fashion school and teaching on Patreon or YouTube. Okay. This is a biggie. The number one thing is rigor. And, when I was teaching at university, I did have a reputation for being a professor who taught a hard class. And those who stuck it out would come back to me and tell me that they appreciated how much they learned and that they learned so much and that they still use the things that they learned in my class. And I know this because they still follow me on Instagram and on Facebook. I always got, those anonymous, my university, the students had to fill out an anonymous survey about the teacher and the class and the facilities, like 3 separate surveys before they got their grades. And I always got really high reviews on those reviews. And I had good relationships with my students. I can generally tell when someone is kissing my butt and someone who appreciates having conversations with me about fashion, about the class, about life in general. And, students will come visit me during my office hours all the time. So I know this. But it's true that I ran a rigorous classroom. I was very hard on my students. My grading scale was pretty tough, but I can't do that on YouTube or even on Patreon. There is only so much I can push my students from an online platform like this. And so that's the number one thing I miss, is the ability to really push my students. And I would love to do some sort of design boot camp where I can replicate that experience and really push my students to their fullest potential by pushing them really hard for a short period of time. And I don't actually know how to make that happen. It might have to be in a physical space where I'm with the students, several hours a day, every day, and we're grinding and we're really focused. And that's all we're doing for a set period of time. And I'm just there. And, I would love to have something like that happen, but we'll see. The question is, 5 fashion trends you hate and you think you can fix. Avoiding its existence is not a fix. I mean, I don't know if I have the power to fix trends or whatever, but celebrity worship is a trend I hate. We've always loved celebrities throughout history. We've always looked up to the rich, the royalty. Nobility followed the royalty, and the peasants tried to style themselves after the rich. It's always been a thing. But this level of celebrity worship that we are living through right now is just unreal. In terms of just physical fashion trends, everything comes and goes in fashion. There are always combinations that work, things that, really work for some people, really don't work for other people. I think a lot of things can be styled. I mean, personally, I hate ballet flats. They look terrible on me. They're so bad for your back. I don't get it. I could do a ballet flat shape on a proper sole, preferably a flat form sole, and maybe a buckle to keep them on my foot without tensing your foot so much. I think I just described a Mary Jane. I wish more men would dress like hot librarians. I think women have really nailed the hot librarian look, but I think men should dress more like hot librarians. I wish people would stop calling their stuff elevated basics when they can't tell me what's so special about them. There's basics and there's elevated basics. You keep calling your stuff elevated basics, but what's elevated about it? If you can't tell me, then they're not elevated. They're just basics. And that's just, tell me what's special. I wish people would make sustainable fashion that doesn't look like it's conventionally attractive thin white women who drive big SUVs to hot yoga. You know what I mean. That aesthetic I'm talking about. I would like to see sustainable fashion that is not that aesthetic. Okay. Oh, you know what I hate? This is more of a construction, a body thing, a fit thing, but I really hate those bikini bottoms where the crotch is so narrow that you're just waiting for a lip to fall out. You know what I mean? Someone asked about tips and tricks for sewing swimwear. Okay. The thing about sewing swimwear or any kind of really stick to your body spandex is, I'm always talking about if you have a body that you like you got like a bandeau bikini pattern that really works for you and you got the fit just right. And you want to make this bandeau bikini over and over again in different colors and prints, you have to make sure that each fabric you use stretches the same amount as the original pattern stretch. Okay, so keep like half a yard of your original fabric around and make sure you're comparing it to future fabrics, because if you find a fabric and it stretches way more than that original pattern, it's not going to act the same, especially something like a bandeau where like a boob or two will pop out if the stretch is not, holding a person in well enough because it's too loose. The stretch is too loose. Okay, so you have to test the stretch on new fabrics you want to cut with if you're cutting the same identical pattern each and every time. That's my number one tip for any kind of swimwear or tight stretch. What's the one thing that you would love to experiment with in fashion? 3D software like Clo 3D or textile science, textile development. What is the greatest thrill in your career thus far? I would say my competition wins, the Gen Art Design Competition and becoming a finalist for the Oscars Design Challenge, because both those things were based purely on merit. I submitted those things and, they just, social media and popularity through social media, it wasn't like it is now. Nobody knew my name, and I won those competitions purely based on merit, on the merit of my designs. I didn't go through an interview process where someone fell in love with my personality and decided that I should win. It was purely based on sketches that I sent in. In the case of the Gen Art one, I had to do full boards with fabrics and flats and everything. But yeah, it was purely based on the work that I submitted, not my appearance, not my personality, and not my social media following. And so I'm proudest of those two things. Sometimes, I pursued teaching because I ended up falling in love with it. If you know my story, then you know that the first semester I just taught the one class because I wasn't sure I was going to love it. But I looked forward to those Tuesdays teaching my fashion design level 1 students so much that I asked for more classes the following semester. And, just because I fell in love with teaching doesn't mean that, sometimes I don't think about designing, sometimes wondering if I ever had the talent to make it. It's just one of those things that you think about sometimes. Okay, someone suggested to me, one of my friends I was talking to suggested that I do like a story of the day for my podcast from one of my fashion days. And not every story is going to be related to fashion, but hopefully this is a fun segment for y'all. So years ago, I used to work for this company based out of Denver, and they used to fly me out, and we used to record stuff together. And they, booked me a nice hotel, and they would hire a driver to and from the airport, things like that. Okay, kind of like normal but fancy, businessy stuff, right? So one day I'm in Denver, and this driver comes to pick me up to take me to the airport, and he is this white guy, like maybe 60, older white guy. And I get in the car, we exchange pleasantries, we start talking about Denver real estate, whatever. And we get on the freeway, and I feel like he would have more road rage if I wasn't in the car. But he's kind of like mumbling under his breath whenever someone does something dumb on the road, which is fine. I don't care because I'm kind of like that too. And then at some point he is like, "Goddamn aliens. I'm so sick of all these aliens." And I kind of froze. And I'm like, oh. So he's like muttering about aliens under his breath. And he's like, you can always tell an alien because of how they drive. And I'm like, oh no, we're turning this into an Asians can't drive episode. Like, I'm like, what do I do? What do I do? It's not like I could just like, we're on the freeway on the way to the airport. It's not like I could just get off at the next intersection. And he's like, they think they can fool me, but they can't. They can't. Okay. You know, you could tell when someone's a real pod person. Okay. And he starts going off about literal little men from Mars conspiracies, like full on Area 51, Area 54, whatever area that is. You know, he talks about going in his RV with his wife to New Mexico and they meet up in these groups to look for aliens in the sky, and how the government wants to cover up all these, like, and I'm like, oh, he means alien. And I was never so relieved to meet a conspiracy theorist in my life. He wasn't racist. He really thought that the government was conspiring to cover up the existence of outer space beings. Yeah, that was, it was a very like, I was a mess. I was relieved and also so confused. And I was like, oh, okay. And then it was so funny because the conversation led into how much he loves his wife and these trips that he takes. He was just kind of like a romantic old dude who he and his wife like to go and look for aliens together. Okay, so I am going to wrap things up with the rant of the day. And I was hanging out with my husband and mixed company. And by mixed company, I mean some people I know, some people I don't know. Okay. And we were all hanging out in this kind of like loose, small circle. And they were mostly my husband's friends. And, you know, I was talking to this woman and I was talking about how much I wanted a Loewe elephant bag. And I'm going to flash a picture on the screen. This podcast is not going to be picture heavy at all, unless you like looking at my face a lot. Sorry about that. But I just really love the Loewe elephant bag. I have for years. And I just really want one. I think it's adorable. And this woman said, just make one. And I was like, no thanks. And she's like, just make one. And I'm like, well, I don't know how, and I don't want to, so I'm not gonna. And she's like, oh, come on, you can make one. I know I'm not the only one here who makes, creates, sketches, illustrates, involved in the fashion industry, et cetera, who cannot stand it when anytime you want something, everyone just assumes that you should just make it. Okay? I don't know how to make a Loewe elephant bag. Okay, it's a bit of a pattern puzzle that I don't have time for. I'm sure that if I had all the time in the world, that I could puzzle my way around it and analyze many pictures of the Loewe elephant bag and figure it out, because, you know, my leather sewing is not the worst in the world, but I don't want to. Okay, I don't want to. Sometimes I don't want to make the thing. I just want to buy the thing, and I shouldn't have to make the thing if I don't want to. And you telling me that once, fine. Okay, why don't you make it? I told you why I don't want to make it, so shut the F up. And you're my husband's friend, so I'm not going to say anything, but you need to shut the F up now. Do you know how many times in that short conversation she told me to make something? Stop. You know what? Just stop talking to me immediately, okay? I don't need to make things, okay? First of all, I could just admire things and not even just want it for myself, okay? And you know what is like even extra mad? It's always those kinds of witches who think everything is so easy, and that's why people in Malaysia only deserve 30 cents a day to make clothes all day long so that you can have a $5 t-shirt that you wear twice and throw away, okay? No one has respect for the time and energy and brains to like make anything. And so they see someone and they know vaguely that you have a sewing machine at home maybe, and just assume that anytime you like something, you can just make it by yourself, because they have no knowledge and they have no respect for what goes into making wearables. And yeah, And that is the root of fast fashion. They're not educated at all whatsoever. They just assume everything is so easy. I can make that. I can do that. No, you can't. No, you can't. You think your nephew who learned Photoshop in 3 months can be a graphic designer. They can't. No, they can't. Okay. They're not good at it. Okay. Just because they have a lot of fonts and can scroll through them doesn't make them a graphic designer. Just because you can sew a straight seam doesn't mean that you can make an elephant bag yourself. Can you yourself think, I want to get there someday and work towards those goals? Yes, absolutely. My whole being as a teacher is predicated on the fact that I believe that with enough dedication, you can do whatever the hell you want. But to tell someone, yeah, just make it. It'll take you like an afternoon. No, it will not take me an afternoon to make me an elephant bag from Loewe, okay? But she's my husband's friend. So I was like, you know what? It's cold. I'm going to go in. Okay, good night, guys. Bye. I haven't seen her since. I haven't spoken to her since. I know you've been there. If you're someone who makes anything or someone thinks you knit and every time you admire something, they're like, oh, just make one yourself. And then you just want to, just punch them a little bit. Yeah. Yeah. I know we've all had those experiences, okay? So that's enough for me today. I have a lot of ideas for this podcast that I'm just going to throw at you and we'll see what sticks. I do eventually want to have some guests on here. Let me know what you thought of the different segments. And, of course, please keep things nice and respectful. Tell me what you like. Tell me what you didn't like. Tell me if you have any questions that you would like me to answer on a future episode of the podcast. These podcasts are going to be coming I think every other Sunday, and then every other Sunday is going to be a video. Okay, that's the loosey-goosey plan right now. Remember, I don't have a plan. We're just going wild and free on the podcast, which is hilarious because on the channel, I plan my content well in advance. But we're just gonna, we're gonna play on the just the free flow vibe over here. All right, so. Anyway, give this podcast a thumbs up if you enjoyed my ramblings today, and I will talk to you soon.